The clock ticked softly in the corner of Emily Parker's small apartment, each second echoing through the quiet space like a reminder of how still her life had become. The morning light filtered through half-closed blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the room. Outside, the world moved on. Cars hummed, footsteps hurried, and the faint sound of distant laughter reached her balcony. But inside, Emily sat alone at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold at 32. Emily's life looked peaceful from the outside, maybe even ideal. She had a stable freelance career as a graphic designer, a cozy one-bedroom apartment in the city, and a few close friends who texted her often enough to remind her she wasn't forgotten. But beneath the calm surface, there was a quiet ache. The kind of ache that doesn't shout, but lingers like the echo of something once beautiful that never fully left. Emily wasn't lonely in the dramatic sense. She had learned to live well on her own. Yet sometimes when she watched the sun fade into the skyline, she wondered when her life had started feeling like a paused movie. She had built her routines carefully: morning coffee, client calls, evening walks, and a weekly visit to the bookstore where the owner always greeted her with a knowing smile. But even with all the rhythm and structure, there was something missing, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't love, at least not the kind found in movies or old songs. It was more like connection, a moment of being seen, understood, or even surprised by life again. That Tuesday morning started just like any other. Emily woke up to the sound of light rain tapping against her window, the city cloaked in a silver mist. She smiled faintly. Rain had always comforted her. There was something peaceful about it, the way it softened the edges of everything, making even the noisiest street seem quiet for a while. Her phone buzzed with the usual notifications, emails, reminders, and a message from her best friend, Claire, asking if she was coming to dinner that weekend. Emily typed a quick "I'll try," though she already knew she might cancel again. Lately, she had found comfort in solitude, even when it felt a little heavy. As she sat at her desk, she noticed her pantry was nearly empty, one of the many signs she'd been to, wrapped up in work to take care of herself properly. She sighed and opened her laptop, scrolling through the grocery delivery app. "At least food can find me," she muttered to herself with a tired smile. She placed a simple order: vegetables, milk, and her favorite brand of tea. Then she returned to her design project, trying to focus on color palettes and typography. The steady rhythm of the rain outside helped her sink into her thoughts. Time slipped away quietly, the kind of morning that felt endless, yet fleeting. Around noon, the sound of the doorbell startled her. She blinked, checked her watch, and frowned. "Already," she murmured, pushing her chair back. When she opened the door, the world seemed to pause for a second. Standing there was a young man, maybe mid-20s, wearing a rain-damp delivery jacket. He was holding 2 brown paper bags, beads of rain still glistening on his hair. His smile was easy, genuine, the kind that reached his eyes. "Delivery for Emily Parker?" he asked, his voice calm but slightly breathless, as though he'd just run up the stairs. Emily nodded, a little caught off guard. "Oh yes, that's me. Thank you." As she reached for the bags, their hands brushed for a moment. A small, ordinary thing. Yet it sent a faint warmth through the air between them. She quickly stepped back, embarrassed by her own reaction. "Sorry," he said quickly, laughing softly. "It's raining harder than I thought out there. I hope everything inside's still dry." "It's fine," she replied, returning the smile. "You've probably had a long day in this weather." He shrugged. "It's not so bad. I kind of like the rain." Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded toward the hallway. "Would you like a napkin or something? You're soaked." He smiled again, that same warm, polite smile that felt strangely familiar. "That's kind of you, but I'll be fine. I should get going. Lots of stops to make." "Course," Emily said quickly, realizing she was holding up his work. "Thank you again." He gave a small wave before heading down the corridor. Emily watched him for a second longer than she meant to. The sound of his footsteps faded, replaced by the steady whisper of rain against the windows. When she turned back inside, The apartment felt a little less empty than before. She unpacked her groceries quietly, but her thoughts kept wandering. There was something about this stranger's calm presence, something steady, almost grounding. She didn't even know his name, yet she found herself wondering if she'd see him again that night. As the rain continued to fall and city lights shimmered through the mist, Emily sat by the window with her cup of tea. The quiet no longer felt quite the same. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stir inside her. Not love, not yet, but a gentle curiosity about what life might bring next. The next few days passed quietly, though Emily found her thoughts drifting back to that brief meeting at the door. It wasn't just the delivery itself, it was the unexpected ease she'd felt speaking to a stranger. It's a kind of calm she hadn't known in years. There was something disarmingly simple about the moment. Like the world had slowed down just long enough for her to notice that not all connections needed effort or explanation, but she brushed the thought aside, convincing herself it was just a passing feeling. Life had a way of reminding her to stay grounded. Emily had learned to be cautious with her heart. Years ago, she'd been engaged to someone she thought she'd spend forever with, a man named Evan, whose laughter used to fill her small apartment like sunlight. But time had turned their warmth into silence. Their love had slowly faded, not with fights or betrayal, but with distance, long work hours, unspoken frustrations, and the quiet realization that sometimes love ends not because of anger, but because it runs out of room to grow. When the engagement ended, Emily didn't break down dramatically. She simply stopped reaching for her phone in the mornings and learned to make coffee for one. People often say heartbreak makes you stronger, but for her, it just made her quieter. She poured her energy into work, travel, and solitude. And yet, every now and then, a memory, a song, a scent, a familiar street corner would remind her of what it felt like to be truly seen. That's why, when the delivery boy smiled at her that day, something inside her stirred. It wasn't love, not even close. It was just a reminder that she was still capable of feeling something beyond routine. A week later, another delivery arrived. This time, Emily opened the door before the second ring. "Hey!" The young man greeted, his voice bright despite the chilly wind behind him. "Emily Parker, right? I think we're becoming regulars." Emily laughed, surprised by her own amusement. "Looks like it. I should probably start tipping the rain instead of you it. Seems to follow every time you do," he chuckled. "Guess the weather likes us both." They shared an easy silence before she asked, "What's your name? I never caught it last time." "Ryan," he said, adjusting his jacket. "I'm just filling in for a friend for a few weeks, but I might be around a bit longer." "Well, Ryan," Emily said kindly, "thank you for braving the weather again." He smiled. "It's part of the job. But honestly, most doors open and close in seconds. It's nice when someone actually says more than thanks." Emily's heart softened. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to pass through days without being noticed. "I know that feeling," she replied gently. "Sometimes a small conversation makes a day feel a little less heavy." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, especially when life feels like it's on repeat." That line hit her. Emily thought of her routines, her quiet meals, her endless emails, her evenings by the window. She wasn't sure why, but his words lingered long after he left. Over the following weeks, Ryan's visits became more frequent. Sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by quiet intention. Emily never said it aloud, but she found herself looking forward to those short moments, the soft knock, the brief smiles, the polite small talk that somehow felt deeper than most long conversations. They started sharing fragments of their lives. Ryan talked about his mother, who ran a small bookstore outside the city, and how he helped her on weekends when he could. He mentioned he'd once dreamed of studying fine arts, but had paused. College to support his family. Emily listened with genuine interest. There was something familiar in his words, the quiet sacrifices, the quiet hopes. One afternoon, as rain drummed against the windows again, Brian noticed a small sketchpad on her coffee table. "You draw?" he asked, surprised. Emily smiled faintly. "Not much anymore. I used to sketch designs before moving into digital work." It felt more personal somehow. He nodded thoughtfully. I know what you mean. I used to paint. Oils, mostly. But life got busy. Funny how we stop doing the things that make us feel alive. Emily looked up at him then, her eyes soft with understanding. Maybe that's something we're both guilty of. For a moment, their silence wasn't awkward. It was full, like two quiet souls recognizing something familiar in each other. That night, Emily sat by the window again, her cup of tea warm between her hands. She replayed the conversation in her head, not because of the words, but because of how easy it had been. There had been no pretense, no expectations, just two people talking honestly, and maybe that was what she'd missed all along, the simplicity of connection without tea. The weeks had passed with an almost imperceptible rhythm, like a gentle tide lapping at the edges of Emily's carefully structured life. She had come to think of Ryan's deliveries as ordinary routine, but ordinary had begun to feel extraordinary. The small conversations, the easy laughter, the shared moments of quiet understanding, they were weaving themselves into her days without her realizing. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when the twist came, subtle yet unmistakable. Emily was rearranging her living room, moving furniture to catch more light from the rain-streaked windows. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Delivery for Emily Parker. Ryan's familiar voice called Dot. Emily smiled, though she felt a strange flutter in her chest. I think we're seeing a lot of each other lately, she said, opening the door. He chuckled, holding out the paper bags. Seems that way. Or maybe the universe just keeps bringing me here. As she took the bags from him, their hands brushed again, that simple touch that had startled her weeks before. But this time it felt different. Comfortable, familiar, like the brush of a friend's hand that also somehow awakened hope. I didn't expect you to be here for long. Emily said lightly, though her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. I'm actually on a short break before my next stop, Ryan replied. Mind if I step in for a moment? Emily hesitated, then nodded. Sure, just for a minute. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked air. Ryan set the bags on the kitchen counter and glanced around, his expression thoughtful. It's cozy in here. You always keep it so. Warm, Emily smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude that someone noticed more than the surface of her life. I guess I like comfort. Small things matter when most of your day is spent behind a screen. He nodded, leaning slightly against the counter. I get that. Small things make all the difference sometimes. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the rain patter against the window. Emily felt a pull she couldn't quite name. A quiet tension in the space between them that wasn't awkward, but electric in its own gentle way. Then something ordinary happened. A small, almost trivial event that somehow shifted everything. A gust of wind blew through the slightly open window, scattering some papers on the floor. Without thinking, Emily bent down to grab them, and Ryan knelt beside her, their hands brushing once more as they reached for the same sheet. Emily looked up, startled to find him smiling softly at her. We really do keep meeting, don't we? He said. She laughed lightly, though her heart raced. I guess we do. It was then, in that brief, shared moment, that Emily realized how deeply she had begun to care for him, not because of grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but because of small, quiet consistency. Ryan's presence had become a gentle pulse in her life, subtle yet steady. And though she hadn't admitted it aloud, a part of her had begun to hope that he felt the same. Ryan's gaze lingered on her a second longer than usual, and Emily felt her chest tighten. There was no pressure, no expectation, just an unspoken acknowledgement of something real, something tender growing between them. I should probably go, Ryan said after a pause, his voice soft. But thank you, Emily, for letting me stay a little longer than usual. Of course, she replied, her voice calm but her heart pounding. It's nice having someone to talk to who understands. He smiled, and there it was again, that spark that seemed to ignite every time their eyes met. Without another word, he left, and Emily closed the door. Leaning against it as she exhaled slowly, she walked to the window and watched him disappear down the hall. His jacket damp, his smile lingering in her mind. The rain had stopped now, leaving the streets glistening, almost magical in their quiet reflection. Emily felt a mix of exhilaration and nervous anticipation, a feeling she hadn't known in years. For the first time since her heartbreak, she allowed herself to imagine what could be. Not in a dramatic fairy tale way, but in a subtle, real sense. She pictured the two of them sharing more moments like this. Small talks over coffee, shared laughter in the drizzle. Quiet evenings talking about dreams and memories. And with that thought came the twist of the present. Emily realized that life had a way of offering second chances, but often in the smallest, most unexpected ways. The delivery that had seemed ordinary weeks ago had become something extraordinary. Fate, timing, or mere coincidence. Whatever it was, it had nudged their paths together again, giving her a moment she didn't know she needed. Sitting by the window, Emily traced the raindrops sliding down the glass. She smiled, a quiet, hopeful smile that felt like the start of something new. Something that didn't erase the past, didn't promise a perfect future, but reminded her that small, unexpected moments could open the heart again, and deep inside, she felt it, the beginning of a bond that was real, tender, and full of promise. A bond that might change everything, starting with a simple knock at the door. The days that followed. Ryan's unexpected visit were quieter than usual, yet filled with an invisible tension neither Emily nor he could fully name. Life seemed normal on the surface. Deliveries, work emails, rainy afternoons, but beneath it, both felt the pull of something unspoken. Emily noticed it first. She found herself glancing at the door at odd moments, imagining him walking up the hallway with the same easy smile. She replayed their last conversation in her mind, over and over. The gentle brushing of hands, the soft laughter, the way he looked at her like she was more than just another stop on his route. And yet she hesitated. There was a quiet caution that held her back. Years of heartbreak had taught her to guard her heart. She didn't want to risk it again, not fully. The longing she felt was intense, yes, but it was wrapped in a layer of fear, fear of disappointment, fear of expectation, fear of acknowledging something real before it was safe to do so. Ryan, meanwhile, carried his own restraint. He replayed the small moments of connection just as Emily did. The way she laughed when he joked about the rain. The way her eyes softened when she talked about her sketches. Each detail felt significant, each word heavy with meaning. He wasn't ready to speak aloud. He wondered if she felt the same pull, the same quiet warmth that lingered in his chest whenever she was near. Yet he never acted on it directly. There was a hesitation in him that mirrored hers. It's a mutual, unspoken understanding that some feelings needed time to breathe before they could grow into something deeper. Every time he knocked on her door, he felt a thrill, but also a restraint, knowing that rushing forward might break the delicate balance they had found. One evening, Emily was at her apartment arranging flowers in a small vase by the window. The soft light of sunset filtered through the glass, making the rain-streaked streets shimmer. A knock at the door made her heart jump. It was Ryan. He looked slightly windblown, his jacket damp from the drizzle outside. "Hey," he said quietly. "Mind if I come in for a moment?" Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course, they stood in the living room, surrounded by the scent of rain and fresh flowers. Neither spoke at first. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was charged full of all the things they hadn't said but felt deeply. I've been thinking," Ryan began, carefully choosing his words, "that sometimes we let the small things go unspoken. And maybe that's okay. But sometimes, maybe it's worth noticing them anyway." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "Noticing them?" she asked softly. He nodded, taking a small step closer, though not too close. "The little moments that matter. The ones that make you feel alive. Even if it's just for a second. With you, I've realized. There are a lot of those moments." Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed fragile on her tongue. She had felt it too. The quiet connection that had been growing, unnoticed yet undeniable. But to speak it aloud felt like stepping off a ledge into uncertainty. "I know what you mean," she whispered finally. I've been feeling it too. But I wasn't sure if I should say anything." Ryan's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief washing over his face. "You were feeling it too." Emily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, it's strange, isn't it? How someone can become important so quickly without even trying." He smiled back, and for a moment the room felt suspended in time. The unspoken words between them were no longer heavy. They were lighter, like a breeze that finally finds a path through the trees. "Emily," Ryan said softly, "I don't know what the future holds. I don't even know if this us will last. But I do know that these moments right now feel real, and I don't want to ignore that." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mix of relief and gratitude. "I feel the same way. I've been so cautious for so long, but this, whatever this is, feels genuine." They stood there quietly, letting the words settle between them. It wasn't a confession of grand declarations or promises they couldn't keep. It was something simpler, something deeper, an acknowledgement of shared feelings, a recognition of longing, and the willingness to admit that life could be brighter than they had expected. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, but it no longer felt gloomy. It felt alive, like a gentle accompaniment to the quiet unfolding of something tender and true. For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to breathe fully, without the weight of hesitation pressing down. Ryan, too, felt the tension in his chest ease, replaced by a sea. The days after that quiet acknowledgement of unspoken feelings passed with a strange blend of hope and hesitation. Emily noticed it the moment she woke up each morning, a soft tug in her chest, a gentle flutter when she thought of Ryan. She told herself not to read too much into it, not to let anticipation cloud her judgment. Yet the memory of his smile, his quiet words, and the simple warmth of his presence lingered longer than she expected. For Ryan, it was the same. He felt it in the way his thoughts returned to her, in the way his footsteps seemed to carry him toward her apartment without conscious choice. The rain, which had always been a backdrop to their encounters, now seemed almost like a signal, a reminder that something important was happening, something that demanded attention. And then came the day that shifted everything. It was late afternoon, and Emily was preparing her favorite tea while listening to the soft hum of the city outside. The rain had returned, tapping lightly against the windows. She heard the familiar knock, and her heart lifted immediately. Ryan stood there, looking slightly different than usual, a bit more serious, a bit quieter. There was a tension in the air that made her pause. "Hey," he said softly, holding the usual paper bags. But this time, his eyes didn't flicker with that easy smile. They held something else, a vulnerability that made Emily's stomach tighten. "Ryan, is everything okay?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. He entered, brushing raindrops from his jacket. I needed to see you. Can we sit for a moment?" Emily nodded, motioning toward the living room. They sat across from each other, the faint smell of rain and tea mingling in the air. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "Emily, I've been avoiding saying this because I wasn't sure how to put it into words. But I think I need to be honest with you. With myself, too." Emily's heart thumped. She leaned forward slightly, her hands folded in her lap. "You can tell me anything, Ryan." He took a deep breath. "I've realized that these weeks, these moments with you, they've meant more than I ever expected. I felt a connection with you that I haven't felt with anyone else in a long time, and I can't ignore it anymore. I care about you, Emily, more than I probably should given the circumstances, but it's the truth." Emily's eyes filled with emotion. She had imagined this moment countless times, yet now that it was here, it felt both overwhelming and right. Her voice trembled slightly as she replied, I feel the same way, Ryan. I've tried to be cautious, to remind myself of all the reasons to hold back. But I can't deny it anymore. I care about you too." For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The rain, the city, the distant hum of traffic, everything faded except the presence of the other. The unspoken bond now finally spoken aloud. Ryan reached for the sketch pad that had been resting on Emily's coffee table. He opened it to a blank page and handed her a pencil. "I've been trying to capture something," he said quietly, "but I realized it's impossible to do it alone. Could you draw with me?" Emily smiled, a small laugh escaping her lips. She accepted the pencil and sat beside him, tracing light lines across the paper. It wasn't about the drawing itself. It was about the shared moment, the quiet intimacy of working side by side, the acknowledgement that they belonged in this space together. As the rain continued outside, they talked softly, exchanging dreams, memories, and hopes. The fear of rejection, the hesitation that had kept their feelings hidden, began to melt away. In its place grew something tender, steady, and real: trust. A connection built not on urgency or pressure, but on honesty and courage. At one point, Ryan looked at her and smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted, "but I do know that I don't want to let this go. This, whatever we're building here, I don't want to leave it unspoken, unshared." Emily's heart swelled. "Neither do I. Whatever comes next, I want us to face it together, step by step, one day at a time." And in that quiet living room, with rain whispering against the windows and the faint glow of the setting sun through the curtains, something shifted. The turning point had arrived. What had been unspoken was now spoken. The hesitation, the longing. The quiet struggle that had lingered in both of them was finally acknowledged. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Life rarely is. There were still uncertainties, still challenges to face. But for the first time, Emily felt a sense of certainty in the heart, that she and Ryan had found each other in a way that mattered, that honesty and openness could carry them forward, even when the road ahead remained unknown. As the evening deepened, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. They sat together, side by side, sharing sketches and laughter, letting the simple act of being present speak louder than any words could. And in that moment, both understood something quietly powerful. Some truths cannot be held back forever. When the heart insists on being heard, it finds a way, and when it does, life can change in the most beautiful, unexpected way. The days that followed Ryan's quiet confession were filled with a new, tender rhythm. Emily found herself smiling more often, carrying a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Even the city streets seemed brighter, the rain softer, the hum of traffic gentler. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was simple, real, and quietly profound. Ryan, too, felt the shift. Each delivery he made, each small conversation they shared, no longer carried the weight of unspoken longing. It was replaced by the steady warmth of connection, a sense that the small gestures between them had grown into something lasting. And while neither of them could predict what tomorrow would bring, there was a comfort in knowing they were no longer alone in feeling it. One Sunday afternoon, the kind that seemed perfect for reflection, Emily found herself standing at the window of her apartment. The sky was painted with shades of soft orange and pink, the kind of light that seemed made for memories. A gentle knock pulled her from her thoughts. It was Ryan, carrying a small, slightly worn umbrella, his hair damp from a passing drizzle. "Hey," he said quietly. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course," Emily replied, a smile warming her face. She stepped aside, letting him enter. They settled near the window, watching as the rain faded into the distance. Emily handed him a cup of tea, and for a few moments they simply sat in comfortable silence. There was no need to fill the space with words. They both understood that some emotions were felt more deeply when allowed to exist quietly, without labels or pressure. Finally, Ryan spoke. "You know, these past few weeks have been unexpected. I never imagined that delivering groceries could lead to this." Emily laughed softly, a sound full of warmth. "Life has a strange way of surprising us, doesn't it? Sometimes the smallest events make the biggest impact." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I used to think that life was about big moments, milestones, grand gestures. But now I see. It's the little things, A shared laugh, a quiet conversation, someone noticing you that matter most. And I've noticed you, Emily, more than I've ever noticed anyone. Her heart swelled with a quiet joy. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just the familiar smile and kind eyes, but the care, patience, and sincerity that had drawn her in from the beginning. I've noticed you too, Ryan, she admitted softly. I think I've been waiting for someone to notice me in that way. Without pressure, without expectation. And you did. They shared a long, quiet glance. Words weren't necessary. The connection they had built, slowly, tenderly, honestly spoke louder than anything they could have said aloud. After a moment, Ryan pulled a small sketch pad from his bag. I started this a few days ago, he said, flipping it open to reveal a painting of a rain-soaked city street. Soft light reflecting on puddles, and a small figure standing near a window. I called it The Girl by the Window. I wanted you to have it. Emily felt a lump in her throat. The painting captured everything she felt. The quiet longing. The gentle hope. The way ordinary moments could feel extraordinary. It's beautiful, she whispered. Thank you. I'll treasure it. Ryan smiled, relief and happiness mingling in his expression. I wanted it to be a reminder that life is unpredictable, but that some connections, the ones that matter, find their way even when we don't expect them. Emily's eyes glistened with emotion. She realized in that moment that the quiet ache she had carried for so long had been replaced by something gentle, steady, and real. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or a dramatic tale. It was the simple, profound beauty of being seen, truly seen by someone who cared. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the streets glistening in the soft glow of sunset. Emily and Ryan stepped onto the small balcony, letting the fresh air fill their lungs. She leaned slightly against the railing, and he stood close, side by side, sharing the view. No words were necessary. For a long moment, they simply watched the city, letting the silence speak. Then Emily reached for his hand, tentatively at first, and he held it gently in return. It wasn't a grand declaration or an urgent promise. It was a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had shared and everything that might come. I think, Melly said softly, that life has a way of giving second chances. Sometimes we don't even realize we need them until they arrive. Quietly, unexpectedly. Ryan nodded. And sometimes all it takes is noticing the little moments, being present, and having the courage to speak the truth when it matters most.